The cruelest mistake in the galaxy was assuming a kind man had no teeth. The grand celestial hall shimmered beneath layers of silver-blue crystal as thousands of suspended lanterns drifted through the vaulted chamber like captive stars. Music echoed softly from unseen instruments hidden behind carved obsidian pillars, while noble delegates from 17 systems filled the enormous royal court with flowing robes, polished armor, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Princess Valeth sat perfectly still atop the elevated throne platform, her luminous violet skin glowing faintly beneath the palace lights. The silver chains woven through her midnight hair marked her as heir to the Varelian Empire, but tonight they felt heavier than ceremonial steel. Across the hall, another round of laughter erupted near the diplomat's table. She didn't need enhanced hearing to know who they were laughing at. Adrian Cross stood near the edge of the banquet chamber, holding a simple porcelain cup of tea, while several Varelian admirals towered around him in gleaming military uniforms. At 6'3", Adrian wasn't physically small by human standards, but beside the armored alien commanders, he appeared almost understated. Calm. Civilian. Soft. Tell us again. Human. Admiral Croven said loudly, his bronze-scaled face twisting with amusement. Is it true Earth officers retreat when civilian casualties exceed 20%? A few nearby nobles smirked into their glasses. Adrian blew gently across the surface of his tea before answering. Depends on the officer. And which kind are you? Croven pressed. The kind who dislikes funerals. More laughter spread through the chamber. Valeth lowered her gaze slightly. Months ago, when the Empire announced her political marriage to a human diplomat from Earth, the court had expected outrage from her. Instead, she'd accepted the arrangement with royal discipline. Humans were useful allies. Adaptive. Resourceful. Surprisingly resilient. But Adrian Cross was not what she expected. He didn't posture. Didn't compete. Didn't dominate conversations the way powerful men usually did. During strategy meetings, he often remained silent for entire hours. He spent mornings tending the palace greenhouse himself despite servants begging to assist him. Last week, Valeth had even caught him repairing a broken service drone with his bare hands while humming quietly to himself. It irritated her more than arrogance ever could. Because weakness hidden behind politeness was still weakness. Croven lifted his glass toward Adrian mockingly. To the princess's peaceful husband. May he survive court life another month. This time the laughter became louder. Sharper. Valeth said nothing. She should have stopped it. A royal consort deserved at least basic dignity. But part of her wanted to see whether Adrian would finally react like a real political spouse. Whether some hidden pride would emerge beneath that infuriating calm expression. Instead, Adrian smiled faintly and set down his empty cup. Excuse me, he said softly. I need some air. Then he walked away without another word. No anger. No humiliation. No visible wound at all. Which somehow made the room feel colder after he left. Hours later, the palace slept beneath the glow of Varelia's twin moons. Valeth stood alone inside her private observatory overlooking the endless lights of the capital world when the emergency alarms suddenly activated. Deep red warning strobes flooded the tower walls. A military officer burst through the chamber doors, breathing hard. Your Highness, he said, voice unsteady. We just lost contact with the 7th Karen fleet near the outer colonies. Valeth frowned. Lost contact. Yes, ma'am. The officer swallowed visibly. Every vessel disappeared simultaneously approximately 8 minutes ago. The princess straightened slowly. Destroyed. We don't know. He hesitated. There were no distress calls. No weapon signatures. No debris fields. Outside the palace windows, thunder rolled across the distant skyline as storm clouds gathered over the imperial city. Valeth's pulse slowed instead of quickened. Warrior instinct. Calculation before panic. Who was commanding defense operations in that sector tonight? She asked. The officer glanced down at his tablet. Then his expression changed slightly. Confusion mixed with something, almost resembling fear. Technically, he said carefully, your husband was. The war room smelled faintly of ozone, hot circuitry, and burnt mineral oil as massive holographic projections rotated slowly above the circular command table. Red warning symbols flashed across the dark chamber walls while military officers spoke in clipped, tense voices over overlapping tactical channels. Princess Valeth stood at the center platform in full ceremonial armor now. Silver blue plates fitted tightly across her shoulders and waist, the royal crest glowing softly against her chest. Every screen displayed the same impossible report. 7th Fleet, missing. No debris. No escape pods. No radiation bloom. Nothing. Admiral Croven slammed a clawed hand against the tactical console hard enough to distort the hologram briefly. It is impossible for 32 warships to simply vanish. His golden eyes shifted toward the human analysts standing silently near the rear wall. Unless Earth technology has evolved far beyond treaty limitations. The accusation lingered in the room like static electricity. Valeth ignored it. Her attention remained fixed on the central display where the last recorded image of the Karen fleet floated motionless in deep space. Hundreds of triangular war vessels suspended against the darkness. Then empty stars one frame later. No battle. No visible strike. Just absence. A chill slowly crept beneath her skin. "Where is Adrian?" she asked. One of the younger officers hesitated before answering. He left the palace approximately 40 minutes before contact was lost. Croven let out a humorless laugh. "Perhaps your husband frightened them away with gardening tools." Several officers forced nervous smiles, but nobody laughed very hard this time. Valeth noticed that. Fear was beginning to infect the room. Quietly. Efficiently. Like pressure cracks inside glass. Another officer suddenly spoke from the communication station. "Incoming encrypted transmission from the Karen High Command." The chamber fell silent instantly. Valeth nodded once. "Put it through." The hologram shifted. A massive alien figure appeared above the command table wearing black. Military robes trimmed with crimson metal. Supreme Marshal Dravik of the Karen Dominion. His pale gray face looked strained beneath the harsh tactical lighting. "Princess Valeth," he said slowly. "We request immediate diplomatic clarification." Croven scoffed. "You invade our border systems and now request diplomacy?" Dravik ignored him completely. His eyes remained locked on Valeth. "One of your people has violated the rules of war." The room became still enough for Valeth to hear the faint hum of cooling systems in the ceiling vents. "Explain," she said. Dravik swallowed once before speaking again. 3 hours ago, every command vessel in the 7th Fleet lost autonomous navigation simultaneously. Weapons systems locked. Engines disabled. Internal artificial intelligence overwritten. He paused. Then every screen aboard every ship displayed the same message. Valeth felt her pulse slow instinctively. What message? The Marshal's jaw tightened visibly. "Go home." Silence. Complete silence. Even Croven stopped moving. Dravik leaned forward slightly. "We traced the intrusion signature." Another pause. "It originated from inside your capital." Valeth stared at the projection without blinking. Somewhere behind her, an officer shifted uneasily in his chair. Another muted alarm sounded across the tactical grid. More border fleets retreating. More Karen vessels abandoning formation. Panic spread faster than missiles ever could. "Marshal," Valeth said carefully, "are you accusing the Varelian Empire of cyber warfare?" "No," Dravik replied quietly. "I am accusing one human." The transmission ended abruptly. For several seconds nobody in the war room spoke at all. Then Croven turned slowly toward Valeth, his earlier arrogance completely gone now. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "who exactly did you marry?" Before she could answer, the main chamber doors slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Adrian Cross walked inside, carrying 2 steaming ceramic cups in his hands. His dark gray sweater looked almost absurdly ordinary beneath the flashing emergency lights. Calm blue eyes swept across the room once before settling on Valeth. "You missed dinner," he said gently. Then he held out one of the cups toward her. "I brought tea." The tea smelled faintly of cedar bark and mountain herbs as steam curled upward between the flashing crimson emergency lights of the war room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Princess Valeth stared at Adrian, as if seeing him for the first time, while dozens of military officers watched the human with carefully hidden unease. Adrian seemed completely unaffected by the tension surrounding him. He simply held the ceramic cup out toward his wife with steady hands. "You should drink something," he said quietly. "You have been awake for almost 19 hours. Admiral Croven finally found his voice. "You expect us to believe this is coincidence?" Adrian glanced toward him calmly. "No," the answer landed heavily in the room. "Not defensive, Not aggressive, just honest. Valith accepted the cup slowly, her silver eyes never leaving Adrian's face. You disabled the 7th Fleet? She asked. Adrian tilted his head slightly. Disabled is a dramatic word. Kroven stepped forward immediately. 32 warships lost all combat functionality in under 4 seconds. 3.6, Adrian corrected gently. Silence again. Somewhere near the rear tactical stations, a communications officer quietly muttered an alien prayer under his breath. Valith noticed several military personnel exchanging nervous glances now. Human officers looked especially uncomfortable. Not surprised. Uncomfortable. As though they had been hoping this conversation would never happen. Adrian walked toward the central tactical display, setting his own untouched tea beside the console. The rotating hologram reflected softly across his face while he studied the Karen retreat patterns in silence. They are pulling back faster than expected, he murmured. Good. Kroven looked horrified. Good. Adrian finally looked at him directly. Calm blue eyes. No anger. No pride. Just exhaustion buried very deep beneath the surface. Every hour this war continues, he said softly. Thousands of families prepare to lose someone. The Admiral opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because nobody in the room could remember the last time a military strategist had spoken like that. Valith moved closer slowly. Who are you really? She asked. Adrian gave a small sigh that almost sounded disappointed. Your husband. That is not what I meant. For the first time since entering the war room, something shifted behind Adrian's eyes. Not fear. Regret. He reached into the inner pocket of his sweater and placed a thin black data card onto the command table. Instantly, every tactical display in the room flickered. Security protocols activated across the chamber. One by one, military consoles began overriding their own access restrictions automatically. Bright silver text appeared across the holographic displays. Authorization recognized. Strategic priority Omega. Human command access verified. The room froze. Even Kroven stepped backward instinctively. Valith stared at the authorization codes scrolling endlessly across the central display. There were ancient war clearances embedded there. Human military designations older than the Alliance itself. Entire sections marked classified beyond Imperial access. That clearance level, one officer whispered shakily. It should not exist anymore. Adrian rubbed the back of his neck almost awkwardly. It was supposed to be retired. Valith slowly looked up at him. Retired from what? Before Adrian could answer, another transmission alarm echoed through the chamber. A border distress signal. The holographic map expanded instantly. 3 additional Karen fleets had entered Varelian space simultaneously. Hundreds of ships. Enough firepower to blockade entire star systems. Panic rippled visibly across the room. Officers began shouting overlapping calculations and defense requests, while red tactical markers spread rapidly through nearby sectors. Adrian remained completely still, watching, thinking. Then he quietly asked a single question. How many civilian transports are still inside the corridor? The nearest tactical officer blinked in confusion before checking the display. Approximately 12,000, including evacuation vessels. Adrian nodded once. Okay. Then he reached toward the console. Every screen in the chamber immediately dimmed the moment his fingers touched the controls. Entire military systems seemed to recognize him instinctively. Valith felt something cold slide slowly down her spine as she watched the room react to her husband the way soldiers reacted to incoming storms. Adrian entered a command sequence so quickly the displays could barely keep pace. What are you doing? Kroven demanded. Adrian did not look up. Ending this before children start losing parents. Then the stars on the tactical map began disappearing. The stars vanished one sector at a time across the tactical display, not because ships were exploding, but because entire enemy formations were shutting themselves down voluntarily. One after another, the bright red threat markers faded into dim gray symbols marked disarmed or non-responsive. The war room stood frozen beneath the rotating holograms as officers watched the impossible unfold in real time. Karen battle groups are losing propulsion, a communications analyst whispered. No, wait. They are powering down intentionally. Another voice followed immediately. Life support systems remain stable across all vessels. Weapons offline. Targeting systems erased. Navigation disabled. No casualties detected. Adrian continued typing calmly across the command console while silver streams of encrypted data moved around him like flowing water. The tactical interface responded to him almost affectionately, anticipating commands before his fingers fully touched the surface. Valeth had spent her entire life around military power. She understood fear, understood dominance, understood how dangerous people usually carried themselves. Loud officers, aggressive generals, political predators hiding behind polished smiles. But Adrian felt different. The room did not fear him because he threatened anyone. They feared him because he never needed to. Admiral Croven slowly approached the command platform, his bronze armor reflecting the emergency lights in fractured crimson patterns. "How are you inside their systems?" he demanded. Adrian did not look up from the console. "Because they are using human infrastructure." Croven frowned. "Impossible. Karen technology is independent." "No," Adrian replied softly. "Their warships still run modified Earth quantum routing beneath the outer architecture. Most species build new systems on top of old frameworks. Humans designed the foundations during the Resource Accords 26 years ago." Valeth stared at him carefully. "You helped build those systems?" Adrian finally paused. For a moment the room became silent except for the low mechanical hum of tactical processors cooling beneath the floor. "I wrote most of them," he admitted quietly. Nobody spoke after that, because suddenly every terrifying thing made sense. The missing fleets, the panic in human intelligence personnel, the impossible access levels. Valeth remembered something her father once told her during childhood military training. Never fear the warrior carrying the largest weapon. Fear the quiet engineer who built the battlefield. Another alarm sounded across the chamber. Then another. Communications channels flooded simultaneously. Karen retreat confirmed in Sector 8. Civilian evacuation corridor now secure. Border stations report complete enemy withdrawal. The tension inside the war room shifted abruptly from panic into stunned disbelief. Entire invasions were collapsing without a single battle being fought. Adrian removed his hand from the tactical controls at last. The displays stabilized immediately. He looked exhausted now. Not physically. Older somehow. Like someone reopening doors they had buried years ago. Valeth noticed his fingers trembling slightly before he folded his hands behind his back. "They will not attack again tonight," he said quietly. Croven stared at him with open suspicion, now mixed heavily with unease. "You crippled an entire military force in under 1 hour." Adrian's expression remained calm. "No, I gave them a chance to go home. And if they refused?" Croven pressed. Adrian met the Admiral's gaze for several long seconds. The room seemed colder suddenly. "They did not," he answered. That frightened Croven more than any threat could have. Valeth could see it clearly now. The realization that Adrian Cross was not merely intelligent. He was restrained. Deliberately restrained. Which implied something far more dangerous beneath the surface. One of the younger human officers near the rear wall finally stepped forward nervously. "Sir," he said carefully toward Adrian. "Central Command has been trying to reach you for the last 30 minutes. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. "Of course they have. They are requesting immediate strategic authorization." Adrian sighed softly. "Tell them no." Several officers looked genuinely shocked. "No," the human officer repeated. "Sir, they said it is priority Omega." Adrian picked up his untouched tea at last, though it had long since gone cold. "That is exactly why the answer is no." Valeth stepped closer to him slowly. "What is priority Omega?" she asked quietly. Adrian looked down into the dark surface of the tea for a long moment before answering. "The protocol Earth created," he said softly, "for wars humanity never wants to fight again." Outside the palace windows, thunder rolled across the night sky, while somewhere far beyond the stars, entire fleets turned around and fled from a man who still smelled faintly of cedar tea and greenhouse soil. Rain drifted softly across the palace gardens by the time Princess Valeth finally left the war room. The storm above the capital had settled into a cold silver mist that coated the black stone pathways in reflections of moonlight and distant city towers. For the first time in years, the royal grounds felt quiet. Not peaceful, careful, as though the entire empire was holding its breath. Valeth walked alone beneath towering crystal trees while fragments of the night replayed endlessly through her mind. 32 warships erased from combat without a single casualty. Entire fleets retreating from one human sitting calmly behind a console. And Adrian, her husband, carrying tea into a military crisis like someone arriving late to dinner instead of ending an interstellar war. None of it fit together. She found him near the eastern greenhouse, just beyond the palace lake. Warm amber light spilled through the glass structure, while soft mechanical humming echoed from inside. Adrian sat cross-legged beside a damaged maintenance drone on the floor, small repair tools scattered neatly around him. The sleeves of his sweater were rolled to his elbows now, exposing faint white scars running along his forearms beneath the greenhouse lights. He looked up when she entered, but did not seem surprised to see her. "Could not sleep?" he asked quietly. Valeth folded her arms. "Apparently, I married a classified military nightmare. Sleep feels unlikely." A faint smile touched the corner of Adrian's mouth before fading again. "That bad, huh?" The drone emitted a weak electronic chirp as Adrian carefully adjusted one of its damaged joints. His movements were precise, gentle. Valeth watched him closely now. Everything she once dismissed as softness suddenly looked different. The patience, the silence, the refusal to dominate rooms. Those were not signs of weakness anymore. They were control. "Why did you hide this from me?" she asked finally. Adrian did not answer immediately. He tightened one final bolt inside the drone before setting the tool aside. "Because I like being your husband more than being what came before." The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than secrets ever could. Valeth stepped deeper into the greenhouse. Moisture clung to the warm air, carrying the scent of soil, cedar bark, and flowering moonvine. She noticed rows of carefully cultivated plants lining the walls now. Some native to Earth, some Varelian. Adrian had spent months building this place personally. "You grow food during wartime," she murmured. Adrian shrugged lightly. "People still need breakfast during crises." The drone suddenly powered on fully with a cheerful mechanical tone. Its damaged optic flickered blue again before it rolled in a small circle around Adrian's feet. Valeth stared at the tiny machine in disbelief. "You repaired that in less than 10 minutes. It only needed patience." Another quiet answer. Another sentence that somehow felt larger than it sounded. Valeth moved closer slowly until she stood only a few feet away from him. "What was priority, Omega?" she asked again. This time Adrian's expression darkened slightly. Not with anger. Memory. 20 years ago, he said softly. Earth almost lost a war against an alliance much larger than itself. Entire colonies were collapsing. Millions displaced. Governments panicking. He paused briefly while brushing dirt from his hands. Humanity survived because we stopped thinking like soldiers. Valeth remained silent. Adrian leaned back against the greenhouse wall, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the rain-streaked glass ceiling above them. Priority Omega was created afterward. A last resort. Systems designed to end wars before they became extinction events. You built it. Adrian nodded once. Most of it. Valeth felt cold again despite the warm greenhouse air. How many wars has it stopped? Adrian looked down at the repaired drone rolling peacefully through the flowers. Not enough. The answer carried a weight that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. For the first time since their marriage began, Valeth realized Adrian never avoided power because he lacked it. He avoided it because he understood exactly what it could do. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly across the distant mountains while inside the greenhouse. The man feared by entire fleets quietly adjusted the watering system for a row of fragile white flowers. By sunrise, the entire galaxy knew something had gone terribly wrong. News networks across 12 systems flooded every public channel with the same impossible footage. Karen battle fleets drifting silently through empty space. Weapons offline. Engines dormant. Crews unharmed but completely helpless. No explosions. No wreckage. Just dead warships floating like abandoned monuments beneath cold starlight. Inside the Imperial Palace, panic traveled faster than information. Advisors rushed through marble corridors carrying data tablets against their chests, while military personnel sealed entire wings of the government district. Every few minutes, another transmission arrived from frightened border worlds demanding explanations the Empire itself did not possess. Princess Valeth stood near the towering observation windows of the Royal Council chamber, watching transport traffic streak across the dawn sky in glowing lines of silver and blue. Behind her, the emergency summit had already devolved into arguments. Humanity cannot be trusted with this level of technological dominance. If Earth possesses unrestricted control over military infrastructure, every allied system is compromised. We should detain Cross immediately. That final statement made the room fall silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then nobody repeated it. Valeth noticed that too. Fear had evolved overnight. It was no longer fear of war. It was fear of provoking the man who could stop one without firing a shot. The council doors slid open quietly. Adrian entered carrying a small tray with 2 cups of coffee and 1 folded paper bag that smelled faintly of fresh bread. The room immediately stiffened. Several advisors instinctively moved away from the central consoles, as if proximity alone might activate something dangerous. Adrian seemed completely unaware of their reaction, or perhaps simply uninterested in it. He crossed the chamber calmly and handed one of the coffees to Valeth. "You forgot breakfast again," he said softly. She accepted the cup automatically. "The Empire is currently experiencing a military crisis." "Yes," Adrian replied, "which is usually when people forget to eat." One elderly counselor stared openly at him now. "Do humans normally discuss catastrophic events this casually?" Adrian glanced toward him politely. "No, sir. Usually we discuss them while exhausted and dehydrated. I am trying to improve the process." A few younger officers unexpectedly laughed under their breath before quickly hiding it. Valeth watched the room carefully. Even now, Adrian was lowering tension instead of increasing it. The same man who had terrified fleets overnight was offering people coffee and pastries. It made no sense, which somehow made him even more unsettling. A communications officer suddenly rushed into the chamber, breathing hard. "Your Highness," she said urgently, "Supreme Marshal Dravik is requesting direct diplomatic contact immediately." Adrian quietly stepped backward toward the windows. "I should leave." "No," Valeth said before realizing how quickly the word escaped her mouth. Adrian paused. The room noticed. So did she. Valeth straightened slightly. "You started this situation. You will remain." Adrian gave a tiny nod and moved beside the observation wall without another word. The transmission activated seconds later. Marshal Dravik appeared again, though this time he looked visibly exhausted. Dark circles lined his pale features beneath the harsh command lighting. "Princess Valeth," he said carefully, "the Karen Dominion formally requests a ceasefire." Murmurs spread across the chamber instantly. Dravik continued before anyone interrupted him. "Our fleets cannot function while your human strategist remains active." His eyes shifted slowly toward Adrian standing quietly near the windows. The entire chamber followed his gaze. Adrian simply sipped his coffee. "You fear one man?" a Varelian advisor asked in disbelief. Dravik's expression hardened immediately. "No," he paused heavily. "We fear what happens if he stops being merciful." Silence settled over the council chamber like falling ash. Valeth slowly looked toward Adrian again. He stood with one hand inside his pocket, staring out across the waking capital city beyond the glass. Calm, still, human, yet somehow carrying enough invisible weight to alter the behavior of empires. "Marshal," Valeth said quietly, "what exactly do you believe my husband is capable of?" Dravik hesitated for the first time since the transmission began. Then he answered in a voice barely above a whisper. "Princess, we spent decades preparing for humanity's aggression." His eyes remained fixed on Adrian. "None of us prepared for their restraint. The ceasefire lasted exactly 31 hours before someone ruined it." Princess Valeth learned about the attack while standing inside the lower medical district beneath the capital city. The underground shelter smelled of disinfectant, warm metal, and recycled air as hundreds of displaced civilians from the border colonies rested on portable cots beneath rows of emergency lights. Children slept beside exhausted parents while volunteer doctors moved quietly between treatment stations. Adrian knelt near one of the younger refugee boys beside a damaged service terminal, helping him reconnect the power cells to a broken educational tablet. "Try it now," Adrian said softly. The small screen flickered blue. The child's face lit up instantly. "It works." Adrian smiled faintly. "Usually helps if the battery is attached." Valeth watched the interaction from several feet away, still unable to fully reconcile the two versions of the man before her. the strategist feared by fleets, the patient human repairing toys underground while governments panicked above him. Then every light inside the shelter suddenly dimmed. A sharp warning tone echoed through the district ceiling. Military priority alert. Conversations stopped immediately. One of the medical officers rushed toward Valeth carrying a tablet with pale hands. "Your Highness," she said breathlessly. A Varelian patrol convoy was attacked near the Karen border. Adrian slowly stood. The officer hesitated after noticing him nearby. "Civilian casualties?" Adrian asked quietly. "No confirmed deaths," the officer replied quickly. "But 3 transport ships were disabled." Valeth frowned. The ceasefire terms were clear. Another officer activated a holographic report above the shelter floor. Grainy footage appeared instantly. Black Karen raider vessels intercepting a humanitarian convoy in deep space. Panic surged through nearby civilians watching the projection. "It was not an official military order," the officer explained. A rogue Karen commander ignored the withdrawal. Adrian's expression did not change, which somehow worried Valeth more than anger would have. "How many passengers were aboard the convoy?" he asked. "Approximately 4,000 refugees." Adrian looked down briefly, thinking, calculating. Then he quietly handed the repaired tablet back to the refugee child beside him. "Stay close to your mother, okay?" The boy nodded nervously. Valeth stepped beside Adrian as military chatter erupted across emergency channels overhead. "The council will respond aggressively," she said carefully. "They are already demanding retaliation." Adrian stared at the holographic convoy footage in silence for several seconds. "Retaliation creates funerals," he said softly. "Accountability prevents more." Then he turned toward the nearest communications terminal. Officers immediately stepped aside without being asked. Even now, after everything, people moved around Adrian with the instinctive caution soldiers reserved for unstable explosives. He activated a secure transmission line directly from the refugee shelter. Not the palace, not military headquarters. Here, among frightened civilians and exhausted families. Supreme Marshal Dravik appeared moments later, visibly startled by the background behind Adrian. "Cross," he said tensely. "I was just informed about the attack. The Karen Dominion did not authorize this action." Adrian nodded once. "I know. The commander responsible has already fled Central Authority." Dravik paused heavily. "We are attempting to locate him." Adrian's blue eyes remained calm. Too calm. "Do not," he said quietly. Dravik blinked. "What?" "Do not waste resources searching." Silence settled between them. Valeth felt the temperature inside the shelter suddenly drop despite the crowded room around them. Dravik slowly straightened inside the hologram. "Cross." Adrian's voice remained almost gentle. "Marshal, your rogue commander just targeted refugee transports during a ceasefire. I understand the severity." "No," Adrian interrupted softly. "You really do not." The entire shelter became silent enough to hear ventilation fans spinning overhead. Refugees stopped talking. Doctors stopped moving. Even the frightened children nearby looked toward Adrian now. Not because he raised his voice. Because he did not. Dravik swallowed visibly. "What are you going to do?" Adrian glanced once around the shelter. Around the tired parents. The sleeping children. The civilians already traumatized by war. Then he looked back at the Karen Marshal. "The same thing I always do," he said quietly. "I am going to make sure nobody else loses their family tonight." Somewhere far beyond the capital world, hidden inside the darkness between stars, a rogue fleet suddenly lost every functioning system simultaneously. The rogue fleet was found drifting near the outer edge of the Varelian frontier 3 hours later. Every ship remained intact, every crew member alive, but nothing inside the vessels still obeyed them. Engines cycled endlessly without ignition. Navigation maps erased themselves seconds after loading. Weapons systems displayed only a single line of text repeated across every monitor in every language known to the Galactic Council. "Cease targeting civilians." News of the shutdown spread across the galaxy faster than official governments could contain it. Panic followed immediately afterward. Because for the first time in modern history, military leaders understood a terrifying truth. Humanity no longer needed fleets to win wars. Inside the royal archives beneath the palace, Princess Valeth stood alone among towering shelves of restricted intelligence records while cold blue data screens illuminated the darkness around her. She had ordered access to Adrian's sealed military history less than an hour ago. Most files remained classified beyond Imperial authority. Entire decades erased behind black encryption walls. But enough fragments survived to paint the outline of a man she no longer recognized. Strategic advisor, systems architect, conflict resolution specialist, casualty prevention oversight. One report in particular froze her in place. Operation Harbor Light. Estimated projected deaths before intervention, 11.4 million. Estimated deaths after intervention, 0. Valith slowly lowered the tablet in her hands. Another file opened automatically beneath it. Priority Omega Authorization Review. Candidate rejected 47 times due to psychological profile concerns. Final approval unanimous after subject voluntarily surrendered offensive control systems and requested permanent ethical restrictions. Valith read that line twice. Ethical restrictions. Humanity had built safeguards against its own strategist. A quiet sound behind her pulled her attention toward the archive entrance. Elder Counselor Sareth stepped into the chamber carrying a stack of old diplomatic records against his chest. The elderly alien looked unusually pale beneath the dim archive lighting. "You found the buried files," he said softly. Valith turned toward him immediately. "You knew?" Sareth gave a slow nod. "Most senior governments did. And nobody warned me." The old counselor sighed heavily before setting the records onto a nearby table. "Princess, the Human Alliance spent 20 years hiding Adrian Cross from the galaxy." Valith frowned. "Why?" Sareth looked at her carefully for several seconds. "Because every species feared what would happen if someone like him stopped believing mercy mattered." The archive suddenly felt colder. Valith looked back down at the military reports in silence. Thousands of intercepted wars. Entire planetary evacuations coordinated in secret. Starvation crises prevented before they became catastrophes. Adrian's fingerprints appeared everywhere across modern galactic history. But never publicly. Never for recognition. Always hidden behind anonymous humanitarian initiatives or sealed military interventions. "He could have ruled systems," Valith murmured quietly. "Yes," Sareth replied. "Instead, he retired to grow flowers." That answer somehow hurt her chest more than anything else she had learned tonight. Valith suddenly remembered every moment she had dismissed Adrian inside the palace. Every time she mistook restraint for weakness. Every time she watched him quietly avoid political games while assuming he simply lacked ambition. No, Adrian Cross had already stood at the center of enough power to terrify civilizations. He simply chose not to live there anymore. Another archive file flickered open automatically nearby. Psychological evaluation transcript. Human subject exhibits severe aversion to preventable civilian casualties. Subject repeatedly prioritizes evacuation corridors over strategic victories. Recommendation: never place subject in prolonged wartime leadership unless absolutely necessary. Final note attached by Review Board Chairman. The frightening thing is not how dangerous Adrian Cross becomes during war. The frightening thing is how desperately he tries to avoid one. Valith slowly sat down beside the archive terminal, unable to look away from the words. For the first time in her life, she understood why entire fleets retreated from her husband without firing a shot. Not because humanity enjoyed destruction. Because someone like Adrian had already calculated exactly how terrible war could become, and spent decades making sure nobody ever had to see it. 3 weeks later, the war officially ended without a single battle recorded in the final campaign archives. Trade routes reopened. Refugee convoys returned home beneath heavily monitored ceasefire corridors. Karen and Varelian diplomats signed emergency peace accords inside the Grand Celestial Hall, while exhausted governments across the galaxy quietly rewrote everything they thought they understood about humanity. Yet inside the palace, almost nothing changed. Adrian still woke before sunrise every morning. Still repaired broken service drones himself. Still spent hours inside the greenhouse, tending flowers most nobles considered too fragile to survive Varelian climate cycles. Princess Valith found him there again on the first quiet night after the treaty ceremony. Rain tapped softly against the glass ceiling overhead, while warm amber lights reflected across rows of white moonvine blossoms. Adrian stood near the eastern irrigation system, adjusting water flow valves with careful hands, his sleeves rolled to his elbows again. No military officers. No command consoles. No fleets vanishing into silence. Just a man making sure delicate routes received enough water. Valeth stopped several feet behind him. The Council wants to offer you supreme military authority within the Alliance, she said quietly. Adrian did not turn around. That sounds exhausting. You could command entire sectors. I already tried that once. He tightened one final valve before finally looking back at her. I much prefer tomatoes. Valeth almost smiled despite herself. Almost. But the emotion caught strangely in her chest instead, because now she understood the full weight hidden beneath his calmness. The sleepless nights, the impossible decisions, the decades spent preventing wars nobody would ever know almost happened. Why did you really marry me? She asked softly. The question lingered in the warm greenhouse air between them. Adrian leaned back lightly against the metal work table behind him. Political alliances usually work better when both people involved are decent, he answered. Valeth shook her head slowly. No diplomacy, no careful answers. Her silver eyes locked onto his. Why me? Adrian studied her quietly for several seconds while rain rolled down the greenhouse glass around them like drifting silver lines. Because during our first negotiation, he said softly, you stopped an admiral from bombing a civilian mining moon. Valeth blinked slightly. You remember that? You delayed the strike for 7 hours until evacuation transports cleared the area. Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Most rulers would not have bothered. Valeth stared at him in silence. She barely remembered that decision herself. Just another military calculation inside a lifetime of political crises. But Adrian remembered. Of course he did. Because he measured leadership differently than everyone else. Not through victories. Through lives that still existed afterward. A small maintenance drone rolled slowly between them, carrying a tray of fresh seed packets Adrian had apparently ordered earlier that afternoon. The tiny machine chirped proudly before stopping beside his feet. Adrian crouched down immediately to fix one of its loose wheel brackets. Valeth watched him quietly beneath the greenhouse lights. The galaxy feared this man. Entire governments monitored his movements now. Fleets retreated from systems if his name appeared anywhere near military channels. Yet here he was kneeling beside a damaged machine because he did not like seeing small things struggle when he could help them. Valeth slowly crossed the remaining distance between them. Adrian looked up just as she gently took his hand before he could reach for another repair tool. His fingers stilled beneath hers. I thought you were soft, she admitted quietly. Adrian gave a faint, tired smile. I am soft. No, Valeth whispered. You are kind. The distinction mattered. She finally understood that now. Strength was easy. Cruelty was easy. Fear was easy. But kindness from someone powerful enough to destroy entire fleets without lifting his voice? That was something far more frightening. And far more beautiful. Outside the greenhouse, the storm clouds finally broke apart above the imperial capital. Starlight spilled softly across the palace gardens while, inside, Adrian returned to repairing the little drone beside the flowers. Quiet hands. Gentle voice. The same human the galaxy feared most. Because he never forgot that every ship in space carried someone trying to get home.